Hey folks, welcome to the channel. Before I move on to some other builds, I gotta get some sheaths done for some knives I already have. So today is sheath day. I'm gonna be doing sheaths for these two guys. The Kukri and this hunting knife that I did, both in blacked out Cerakote. They're kind of a matching set, so we're gonna do sheaths for both of them. Let's get started. I've got a couple knives here I'm gonna do sheaths for. First one I'm gonna do is this Kukri. This sheath is a little complicated, and I'm going to go over some reasons why. First off, I always like to draw out what my sheaths are going to be on paper first. Don't touch the leather until you really know, because you're just going to waste a bunch of leather. So a couple things first about my sheaths. I like the belt loop as finished leather. So in other words, I'll do the inside of the belt loop always as the rough leather, and the outside is the finished leather. So the way I like to do them is this. So the back side here is going to be finished leather. Okay. Then I will fold over the belt loop. I'll skythe the inside of this, which means kind of shave it down, and then fold it in there. And then the top piece will get stitched over top, and the knife will go over inside like that, over top of this. You'll see what I mean. So that makes things a bit more complicated. On this one, because of the shape of the Kukri, you cannot slide the knife in. So that made this a little more complicated. So the way this one's going to work is this whole top side is going to be open. You'll slide the knife in, kind of slide it down, and then this is going to be a place that has two snaps that snap down and keep the knife in place. All right, so that's the design. We'll go over the other one after. So let's transfer it onto some leather.
Sorry guys, you're going to see this black rolling bands across the video. I'm still figuring out this camera, so bear with me guys. What I'm doing here is just moving the stencil just a little bit, and this is going to end up being my welt. That's the piece of leather that goes inside so you don't cut your stitches. I like to use these heavy-duty shears to cut leather. I just find it easier than using a knife or other specialty blades for leather. I do like to use these scalpel blades to do really fine work. They're super sharp. Now I'm cutting what will be the top part of the sheath, and that's what you're going to see and where most of the stamping is going to occur.
Okay, I've got all these cut out, and really this is the most tedious and time-consuming piece, is to make sure you have them cut out perfectly, they match perfectly, you know exactly where the knife is going to go. Your welts fit perfectly. You know, you want to take the time and do that, because if you don't, you will pay for it later. So, where's my other welt here? There. So do make sure you get all of that fitted nicely. Get the knife, put it in there, make sure it fits. Do all of that before you go stamping, doing all the more time-consuming pieces. So I think I've got all of this fitted up. Now I'm going to do some marking. Now, you can see the welt, this welt's what, about 1/2 inch? You want your stitch line to be in the middle of that welt. So I'm not doing the stitch line right now, but what I'm doing is the marking line for kind of like an outline. I always like to do an outline to know where my stamping and things should be. And I'm just putting that there. So if my stitch line is about 1/4 inch, then my line is another 1/4 inch. I want it at the edge of this welt, so then my stitch line is kind of centered. I might move it in just a little bit because you will be taking a bit of the edge off with just with some grinding when you do when you sand the edge. But so I might move it in just a little. So that means I generally want to set my edge line about the width of my welt. Okay, so now what I'll do is I'm just going to do a light score all the way around. Even here, that'll kind of outline my whole top and let me know where I'm going to put my stamping.
Now I'm just putting some guidelines because I want my stamps to be centered perfectly in the sheath, just so they look nice. Anytime you're going to stamp or otherwise put marks in leather, you really want to get it wet because it will take the stamps much, much better. Here I'm using kind of a dragon scale stamp, but instead of stamping the whole thing, I'm just doing a pattern vertically down the sheath, and I think that gives a cool effect. Now I'm just adding some scalloping around the edges just to give it some definition. To match the blackout effect on the knives, we're going with the black leather dye on these sheaths. Just like I did on the top, I'm doing the same thing on the bottom of the sheath. Here's an example of where you have to plan things ahead of time. So I want to know where the belt loop is going to fold over so that my pattern can be the same on the front and the back. Now I'm shaving the end of the leather that folds down into the sheath, so that it's nice and flat and it's not raised up where you're going to slide the knife in. And what better tool to use than the kukri itself. Now I'm just using an edging tool just to take the corners off, and this is because when you burnish it, you'll get a nice rounded edge. Here I'm burnishing the edge, which is just running a wood block over it. I lost a bit of this footage. So it's time to glue down the belt loop. I'm just touching the edge with some contact cement, getting it kind of wet, then pressing it down. Then I'll be using clamps with pieces of leather underneath so you don't mark up the leather. I'll leave this all clamped up for at least an hour, usually a couple. Now I'm carving some lines where my stitching is going to go. Now it's time to use stitch markers, and these are really important so you get nice even stitches. And I'm not trying to go all the way through the leather, I'm really just putting marks in it because I'm going to drill these holes after. Here I'm using a 16th inch drill bit just to go through each hole. Make sure you have a wood backer. And now I'm going back and carving a line and connecting all the holes in the back of the sheath. Some people hate this step, but I actually really like doing the stitching on these. This is called the saddle stitch, where you have a needle at both ends, you're putting it through, and you're kind of crisscrossing on itself. You'll see what I'm doing. Here I'm just finishing it off. I'm pulling the threads through to the back side, then cutting them off, and then I'll use a torch just to melt the edges and then press them in, and that'll lock the threads in. Now I'm just using this tool just to run over the stitches, and it just kind of presses them down, makes them look nice. It's time to work on the welt. So the first thing I'm doing is just scoring some holes in it just so the glue has some place to go. Now I'm figuring out where the snaps go because I want this flap to fold over and hold the knife in place. I didn't show it when I was stamping, but I thought the flap would be a cool place to put my maker's mark. Here I'm just drilling an inset in the back of the sheath just so that the backer for the snap doesn't touch the blade. It's time to glue this baby together. Now I'm just smoothing all the edges on the grinder, just so that they're all nice and even for when I burnish all the edges later. Once you get into a rhythm with the stitching, it actually goes really fast. I could stitch up a whole sheath like this in probably about 20 minutes. I'm lucky this sheath was black because I stuck myself with the needle and got some blood on the sheath. Time for some burnishing. I've actually put this burnishing tool on my lathe and used it like that, but I decided I would just do this one by hand. I like to use this carnauba cream as almost the final step. I'll put a good coat on, let it dry, and it kind of gives like a white waxy finish, and then I'll buff that off. You got to go really light on the buffer or you'll actually take the dye right out of your leather. And now to the soft wheel to give it a really nice shine and polish. Here they are, folks, all finished. I love how these came out. I love the black leather with a nice shine on it. I think that's a really elegant finish for these knives. I hope you liked this build, folks. If you did, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.